Hi, my name is Jody Green. I'm an Extension educator with Nebraska Extension in Douglas County. I am going to be talking to you about pests of the pantry. We call them pantry pests. Sometimes we call them stored product pests, but they do infest things of food sources and also sometimes fabric. But the ones we're going to talk about are the ones that mainly infest pantries and the food that we keep in our own homes. I'm going to talk to you about some of the most common pantry pests. I'll talk a little bit about their biology, their habitat, some signs that you'll see when you have these pests in your home. I'll talk about where they come from, how they get there in your house, how you get rid of the problem, how you can prevent pantry pests in your home, and then some items to look out for. So first, let's start with some common pantry pests. Well, we've got two different kinds, and they're normally moths or pantry beetles. So something they both have in common is they undergo a complete life cycle. So that means they go through egg, larvae, pupa, and then adult. And the reason this is important is because their larval stage is very different from their adult stage in their feeding habits, their habitat, and so it's important to break that life cycle when we're dealing with pantry pests. So just catching the adult beetle or moth is not going to help in the long term. So I'm going to tell you about their biology and life cycles so you will understand them better, so you'll be able to get rid of them better. So the one that is the most important, most common, is going to be called the Indian meal moth. And this is a two-toned moth. It's cream color and it also has copper wings. And you will see these in a lot of different places because they infest many different products. But when you've got them in your home, the moths can fly around quite readily and they are attracted to lights. And so it's something that you will see that aren't close to the pantry, but something that will be visible. So from this picture, this is what the larval stage looks like. They're cream-colored moths, about 1/2 inch long, and sometimes they kind of have a green or pink tinge to them, but they can crawl along, and you will see them leave webbing in places. So if they get out of the product, they will create this webbing in the shelving units and close to the ceiling. So sometimes you'll see webbing up there, and it's not from a spider, it's actually from a moth. And what they do is that they live and they feed in food products, very similar to the stuff we might have in our pantry. Broken products like nuts, chocolate, flour, cereals. They will infest that. The larva does the damage, so it eats all the product, but when it wants to pupate into the adult moth, it does create webbing, and that's usually the sign people will see. When they turn into moths and fly around, they can fly away from the product, so you might not see them there, but they are attracted to lights at night. If you see these moths, they could be pantry moths. Sometimes people think they're clothes moths, but that would be a different source. So let's talk about some of the beetles that we've got that we may see. So first let's talk about the granary or rice or maize weevil. They can be all these types of weevils, and what they do have in common is that they've got this, here I'll turn it this way, they're a tiny beetle, so 1/10 maybe of an inch long, but they have this snout, this really broad downward facing snout. And we see these in corn, in beans, and in rice. And what they have in common is that they like whole grains. So the female will lay eggs on the grain and the larva will feed on the inside of the kernel and then come out. So you'll see exit holes. And the reason why it's important to identify these is because you'll know where to look. So instead of looking at the flour and the cereal and the pastas, you would be looking for something like whole corn. We've got seeds on growing corn. Right now, this time of year, we've got like decorative ornamental corn and Thanksgiving type decorations. Also bean bags or full grain, whole grain rice. And that's what they're going to like, the whole grain. So they're internal feeders and they complete their whole life cycle inside the grain. When it comes to products that are broken grains or already made products like Bisquick or pancake mix, cake mix, you may find things like flour beetles. These flour beetles are long and thin, they're sometimes red. All of these are flour beetles, so this is the larval stage. They're long and thin little larvae, and they've got little tiny like hooks coming out of the abdomen end. But this is their pupal stage. This is the dormant stage when they no longer are feeding on the food products and they're coming out to mate. But with the red flour beetle, you can often find that whole life cycle in a bag of flour. So that's pretty common. And another one that I'll talk about is called drugstore beetle or the cigarette beetle. These are a lot smaller than the red flour beetle, and you cannot see their heads. They're tucked underneath, but this is what they look like. They're very small, almost pill-shaped. These are, they're called the drugstore and cigarette beetle because they are fans of tobacco products and also pharmaceuticals. And sometimes if you get insects in your ingredients, they do love products and spices like chili, chili powder, and paprika. So things that are made out of red peppers, they love. So sometimes they will get into your spices. So where do these pests come from? Well, as you can see, they like a lot of different products, and with the weevils, since they do like whole grains, they can actually infest the grains while they're out in the field and when they're in the warehouse after being harvested. And sometimes we just bring those home. Some products that come with whole grains are bird seeds and bird foods, sometimes squirrel food as well. So that's also where they all come from. Other times, these pantry pests, like the moths and some of the flour beetles, they'll infest during storage. And sometimes that's storage at the grocery store or in a warehouse and even in our own home pantry. So if you bring something home that's infested, it can infest your other stored goods. So what you can do to get rid of the problem is find that source and get rid of it. It's not something you're going to want to use chemicals for or insecticides for because you need to break that life cycle. So prevention is going to be to inspect those products coming in. If you get a product from the grocery store and they've got a little window like this, sometimes you can see the pests in there and you can shake it around and see if there's any bugs in there. And then that's not the one you want to get. You can also take care of things from sanitation standpoint. So if you spill some flour or spill some bird seed in the garage, you want to clean that up right away. Storage is very important. This is why I've got all these products here in these airtight containers. So clear is good and a nice tight seal so that bugs cannot get into them and you'll be able to see if there are any bugs in there. Stock rotation is very important. We call that first in, first out. So if you have a lot of cake mix, for instance, you want to make sure the product that you bought the longest time ago gets used right away, and then you won't have old products in there. If you do find that you're not using your flour fast enough, you can always stick a container of your food in the freezer, and that will kill all insects as well. If you have products that are infested, you want to keep that in there as about 4 to 7 days. You can also use monitoring devices, and we don't think this is a form of control, but a good form of monitoring. So you can get a pantry pest trap, which is a glue board or sticky trap, and what you do is you put the pheromone trap in there, and that pheromone trap attracts the same species. In the case of a pantry moth, it's a female sex pheromone, so it will attract the males to it. And if you do have a problem, let's say you're in your garage, you'll find that it will catch some moths on there, and that is an indication that you have an infestation. So again, this is not a control type of method, but it is a type of monitoring tool. So this is what the pheromone trap looks like when I open it up. These little parts here that are collecting the moths are sticky. And this here is the pheromone or the attractant for the male moths. They are drawn to it because they think it's a female moth, and then they get stuck on this glue board. But as you can see, they're pretty tiny. They're about less than a ½ inch long, and they've got 2 different colors on their body. So a light color and a dark color. If you've got a pheromone trap, they will go to it. They will be able to find it and they'll get stuck to it, and then you will know that you have a problem. So we only suggest maybe having one per house to monitor. And if you've got moths on there, then you know you've got to do an inspection and find the product and get rid of it. So some common items that can be infested besides bird food, and we talked about grains, squirrel food, flour products, cereal, chocolate. We've also had incidences where people have bought food from a vending machine that has been in there a long time and has been infested. If the seal is broken, we've got spices. People may overlook dog food or pet food, pests like those as well, and also the treats. We can have many life cycles occur on dog biscuits that have been lost under a couch or stuck somewhere. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the bird seed. So when you go to the bird food aisle, a lot of times there can be a lot of moths or beetles nearby, and you'll see them. And you want to make sure the product that you're buying is not infested before you bring it home. Right now we're looking at something called a peanut stacker. So it's got peanuts in it, and it's got some seeds, and it's got some nuts in there, all things that the Indian meal moth really, really likes. And so when we look at this, and it's all in the package, and I don't see any rips or tears, but the female must have laid eggs close by, and larvae can chew into packaging. So even though you may have products that haven't even been opened, they could be infested with insects like the Indian meal moth. So the larvae can produce the silk, and this is what we're seeing in here. And the larva will also go and create a silken type cocoon in order to pupate. And sometimes we'll see that on shelving units and also on the ceiling. If we look closely, we can also see some larval forms of the Indian meal moth. So the Indian meal moth larvae are the ones that are the life stage that does the damage. So the adult moth does not feed, and it doesn't have the mouth parts to feed on any of the products that the larva does. But the larva can chew through packaging and also feed on a variety of things, including chocolate and nuts and cereal products, anything that has those broken grains. So you want to look in there, look for the worms and the larvae, and also look for some of the webbing on the product. I hope these have helped you. The best way to prevent pantry pests is just to not bring them home in the first place, because our food is very important, and trying to go and be reactive after you've found some moths or beetle is very, very difficult. So check your stock and practice good storage with airtight containers.